All right. Okay, well. This is okay. So we are live. We are live. We are live. And we thank you for tuning in to the National D.B.A. Society podcast. My name is Dr. Melvin J. Rivers, and I am your host. And we're so glad that you decided to tune in with us on this morning. I have with me Dr. Brandon Hamilton. He is a business strategist and an organizational engineer and an information architect. His areas of expertise include enterprise resource planning, business process improvements, strategic planning, and project management. He has an extensive background in retail, public energy, education, telecommunications, healthcare, aerospace, and cybersecurity. He is a part time faculty member in the Doctor of Information Technology program at Capella University. He is an accredited management consultant fellow with the Global Academy of Finance and Management. He is the founder and principal consultant of Hamilton Solutions in Chicago, Illinois. He is listed in the International Who's Who of Information Technology. And let me bring to the stage Dr. Brandon Hamilton. Dr. Hamilton, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Dr. Melvin J. Rivers, and good morning, community. I love it. This is an excellent morning to talk about business.
Well, let's just get right into it. You have a vast wealth of information, and I'd just like you to tell us about your family and the the entrepreneurship that you grew up with.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. Yeah, because that's an important aspect of my conversation this morning. Many people go to college. If they go to college, and their dreams are to get a great job, be an employee somewhere. Uh, but I didn't have that image because I grew up uh, in Gary, Indiana, and I had an aunt that took a dream to $1 million business in about a year and a half to 2 years. Uh, and I watched one of my other aunts in Chicago create the hats, which became the hit at the Ebony Fashion Fair. Those wide brim hats that women wore in the 40s and 50s. That was my aunt working with Jet Magazine and Johnson's Publishing. And my father, same thing. He was an artist. And as you can imagine, an African American was struggling just to get a job, let alone an artist trying to get employment. But he worked in some of the bakeries in Greektown part of Chicago, and they kept firing him for reasons that aren't really totally important. But one day, just sitting at the table, instead of complaining about it, he just started making bread and passing it around the neighborhood with his business card on it. People then started calling him to make custom cakes for various events. So he ramped that up to be extremely successful. So I watched all of this, seeing all of that and seeing an idea go from an idea to a business plan to funding to hiring employees affected me considerably. So I got a degree in art thinking that I was going to be my dad's image, but I hadn't really thought through carefully just yet what to do with that. But I had an ingrown skill in physics and math, determined by a freshman high school teacher. And at the time, Gary, Indiana had some of the most creative people coming into that city. A lot of people don't know Gary, Indiana was the first city that actually went out of the red schoolhouse model to have teachers move, teachers teach the same class and students move between those classes. So it had people like Dr. John Dewey was involved with that. You know, everybody knows the Dewey Decimal System, but John Dewey actually was a consultant. So I watched all of that, and I took my art history later to the height that I am now. But I was advised to just operate on my math. So all over Chicago, everybody knew me. I was tutoring math and physics students all over the city, dropping in and out of colleges. And what was the interesting lesson that I learned from that was no one ever asked me, did I have a degree? They just wanted to know, did I know the knowledge? You know, so knowledge became power, and knowledge still is power.
Mhm. How did you make the transition from entrepreneur to mathematics to engineering?
Yeah, excellent question. I was so unaware. I didn't even know what an engineer was, and various folks that met me used to say, "Wow, you know, you're a pretty smart guy. You should really consider engineering." I was so untutored about it. I was insulted. I thought they meant that I would work on a railroad,
Mhm.
driving a train. That's how untutored I was about engineering. So I just flat out ignored it. Uh, I left college uncertain about my future. I was going to school in a pre med program, and left after about a year and a half, 2 years, very uncertain about what I wanted to do. And so I joined the Navy. And when the Navy tested me, I tested real high in physics. So then they sent me to a very special nuclear engineering program to be one of the lab technicians and nuclear physicists and nuclear chemists aboard a nuclear submarine. So I spent the years on that submarine, and that was Admiral Rickover's special group of sailors. So we were very, very well known. So when I got out of the Navy, I was pursued by a consulting company at the time, the second largest engineering consulting company in Boston. Stone and Webster Engineering was the name of that company. They actually sought me out because this group of us were a special group of folk, and they were able to get a hold of me, flew me out to Boston, and I started working there. So I was surrounded by all these degreed engineers, and I then began to see and learn what an engineer was, and that led for me to then pursue a degree in engineering. But I ended up leaving Boston. I was taking classes at night, and it looked like it was never going to come to an end. So I moved back to Chicago, and I entered into the University of Illinois at Chicago, and
Mhm.
that's what got me into engineering.
Mhm. Well, how did you make the transition to California to get an MBA from the University of Southern California?
Uh, After graduation from University of Illinois, because of relationships that I had established, I was an older student. I must have been 35 or so, you know, so I appeared to them as a grad student, even though I was undergrad. So I had this very close relationship with a lot of the faculty. I was also a self-taught computer programmer.
Mhm.
So many of the faculty used me in their research to write code. One of the professors then recommended me to work for a think tank in Washington, D.C., that Jimmy Carter had put together, President Carter had put together to help him do war games. All right. So I was part of a team that wrote software that was writing strategic battles. I worked also in strategic arms limitation talk meetings. I was in the room. I actually, my research was the research that ignited wind turbines in America. You know, and that's a whole long story. But I felt weird because everybody around me had grad degrees. I was undergrad, degreed only, and I was really, really feeling inadequate. Uh, and I felt that I needed some experience. You know, I was a very smart guy, but the only experience I had was on that nuclear submarine. So I joined a professional society, and at that society, there was a person there that was saying that she was trying to move people to Southern California, because Enron was about to happen, but post 3 Mile Island, where they had that crazy nuclear accident in Pennsylvania, they were looking for nuclear people, but they also needed people that have computer science background because they were about to bring up in the San Diego area the very first computer controlled nuclear power plant. So I was high demand. They flew me out there, and bam, there I was now in charge of the largest, the application running the largest nuclear power plant in the world.
Mhm. Well,
Deeply involved
you're
in engineering.
right.
But let me answer.
You're
I'm sorry, I answered shortly on the MBA part. So I moved up into Los Angeles and I started working aerospace, and I quickly became a project manager. And I didn't really know what project management was, so I was trying to learn about it, and I just felt the management side. I met this CPA that impressed me a lot, and he had gotten his CPA and his MBA from an executive program at University of Southern California. So he recommended me. It came through a recommendation. He said, "I got this one superstar guy I work with back at the Southern California Edison plant. You need to meet him." They then made me a part of an executive cohort program. So that's what got me into the MBA world.
yes. Well, for the benefit of the viewers, uh, we've been going through your educational background. I'd like you to fast forward me to why did you think it was important to get a DBA?
Oh my goodness. That's that's probably the most exciting question you could have asked me this morning. Um, I became very impressed with one of my professors. His name is Dr. Larry Greiner. Some of you in school may have seen his name around. He was an organizational theorist scholar from Harvard. And in a sense, and at that time, all the MBA, executive MBA professors at the University of Southern California were Harvard folks. Warren Bennis was one of my instructors. Some of you read their names around. I got to hang out with them and go to the faculty lounge with them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So Griner and I really, really got close. I read his book and then talked to him a lot about it. And I debated with him sometimes about it. He felt that was rather interesting. No one had ever challenged him like I did, and we ended up being friends. Well, his book is about consulting, management consulting, and I said, I want to be a management consultant. I want to be you. What does it take to be a management consultant? And he said, oh, it's not as straightforward as you think, but let me just say, it starts by getting a DBA. Never even heard of that. So it's like, what is that? I had heard of a PhD, but
Right.
I never heard what a DBA was. And she said, oh, it was created at Harvard in 47, 53. It's debated about when it started. It's blowing up in Europe, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so that became my dream. I decided that day two things. I was going to be a consultant when I finished this MBA somewhere. I would start my own corporation because I was entrepreneurial, and I was going to get a DBA. That's how it happened.
Why didn't you pursue the PhD?
Yeah, I really wrestled with that. That's an absolutely fabulous question. When I started to look at PhD versus DBA, I saw the PhD or any of the traditional degrees related to that. Uh, PhD in education, PhD in math, uh, as very focused on a body of knowledge where the DBA was focused on professional practice. And that attracted me a lot. I wanted to, even if I didn't start consulting, I would be consulting with CEOs and vice presidents, and they need a visionary person by their side. And there was a scream at the time as I started to do the research of PhD versus DBA. I started to see that they were looking for more critical thinking CEOs, and some of these CEOs were then looking at the practical degrees, uh, Doctor of Health Administration, Doctor of Information Technology, Doctor of Business. And so I was focused on the DBA side of that because of that. So um, that affected it. But let me just say, I was still a little sophomoric about it. When I moved back to Indiana, I was part of a project to create a community college in the state of Indiana at the time when Governor O'Bannon was the governor of Indiana. A few of us congratulated him, and then we shared with him that, by the way, did you know that Indiana is the only state that does not have a community college system? He was shocked by that knowledge, and he said, "Wow, what are we going to do about it?" So there was a gentleman by the name of Jerry Lamkin. Jerry and I got to be pretty close as well. Jerry wrote his doctorate about trade schools and community college schools that were focused on careers, and they put together a cohort of PhD students to create what is now Ivy Tech State College. So I was in that cohort, and I went all the way through 7 years, only to get at the end about to defend to realize that I don't want to be a dean. I don't want to be the president of a college. I don't, that's what the program was designed to do. And you got to think about your focus and why you're doing these degrees. To invest in a doctorate is an investment. And, sadly, I had invested 7 years, but, God knows what he's doing. I've been able to use my knowledge. Knowledge doesn't disappear. I still consult with universities now. But I started all over again. I realized that I needed to rethink what I wanted to do. I was happy that they wanted me. Actually, they gave me a scholarship. They wanted me in the program so badly, but I did not defend. So I had a rethinking. I was going to go back to California, and I was approached by some of the leaders of DeVry University at the time. They heard about me and said, "Look, before you get on the plane to go back to California, can you meet some of the executives?" One thing led to another, and they hired me then to work in Keller Graduate School. That's before they bought DeVry. And while I was there and rethinking my career, I got a master's in information systems. So that's how I got to be such a IT person. I was self-trained before all that. And I said I might as well put a degree around it. But in the midst of all of that, I was trying to now finish this doctorate thing. And as I was calling around, I became sad to learn the amount of people that don't complete it. The world is peppered with ABDs all over the place, all but dissertation people all
Mhm.
over the place. And I did not want to be one of those. So I started to query different students that were taking programs at different schools, and they began to share with me about the Waldens and the Capellas and the Argosy universities, all these proprietary private schools. And the thing that got my attention was that they were graduating doctorates. They were getting them through, and these doctors were out there making a difference. That did it for me. I then said, I am committed to get on this DBA now at that particular university. The other thing that attracted me, which I didn't know when I earlier started to study DBAs, was that DBAs are extremely international.
Mhm.
And so I had student cohorts, because it was a cohort program. I had student cohorts from all over the world. Uh, Many of my friends were from Greece. One was from Argentina. A couple of millionaires in my class. People from Iran, Iraq, you name it. London, of course, various places in America. And I think as a DBA leader, that's important that you have a global sense of things. So I was very blessed to have been exposed to all of that. So but I went back to my PhD mind and I said, so, do I teach now? I had already started consulting. I had a few clients at that time. And I said, you know, it seemed as if some of the other people that were out there were consulting like me, but they were also teaching part time. So I began to look at the research, and I found that there's a debate going on about the value of the DBA. But it seemed as if there was a new debate happening now about the value of the PhD as it related to commercial use and practical use. It was becoming what had already been advertised as that degree that has power over many of the other graduate programs in America because of the freedom of choice, and different than a marketing BP that would focus your research down a product or service development. The PhD model allows for you to freely think of what you're interested in and expand knowledge. So here you got these two things moving: expand knowledge, deal with the practical need of profit or whatever the corporate goals are. But the credibility side appeared to kick in as I realized that I also am valued because I'm a thought leader and I needed to teach a class here and there. So I started then back into the academy and I started hanging out and teaching classes. And that's kind of what I do now. I do, so, a lot of part time teaching. But yeah, there's an action research element of it, and because I was going to Argosy, was a little bit of PhD-ness and a little bit of practical. I took all of my research classes with all the PhD students, so I can hang with the best.
Mhm.
But they were all discussing that they were going to be principal of this school or superintendent of this school or president of this college. And when they would talk to me, I would say, I already have a company called Hamilton Solutions, and I'll be extending my reach now for my consultancy. I'm not looking to leave this. This is happiness for me. So that's kind of a cliff notes of the journey.
Mhm. Let me ask you this. Uh, right now, today, when you tell someone that you have a DBA, they readily assume that it is doing business as or database administrator. And the real truth of the matter is that when we look at those in the field, I guess the question is, are they representing a DBA like they are supposed to? The reason why I say that
Mm,
is because my personal take on going to school and getting a DBA, I actually believe that it is ludicrous to go for a doctorate degree only to try to find a job. I
yeah,
think that when you go for a doctorate degree, you have to see yourself as a change agent, one
yeah,
that comes in and disrupts the status quo that's not working and come in and design an intervention to achieve what the organization is attempting to achieve. That being said, I'm trying to really frame this question because right now we have people that are going through the DBA program with the end game of finding a job.
yeah,
Can we talk about that?
yeah, yeah. We should talk about that. Um, Very important message there. The university model of traditional doctorates has evolved as it should. Uh, it was actually, if the listeners don't know about it, the PhD was created in Germany, and you got to think about Germany at the time. It was in the 19th century, not the 20th. They were the scientific champions of the world, and so it's research. Increasing knowledge, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Um, but what has happened with the world being more global and your next competitor a click away, and even some of these underdeveloped and developing countries are now competing globally. They really didn't need for you to be an agent of change. They needed you to be the change agent. They didn't need you to adjust your program because they didn't needed you to learn how to be a critical thinker that could change a program. And so there was more looking now at the DBA degree because it was trained as a practicum degree. I mean, when I went through my doctorate, I was interviewing CEOs, I was sitting in on board meetings, One of my classmates was hanging out with T. Boone Pickens when he was making all his money. One of my classmates was a multi-billionaire, and I kept asking him, "Why are you doing this doctorate? You know, you're already a billionaire." And he said, "Yeah, I know. I've checked that box, but now I want to make a difference. I want to see if I can go around and change the economies in different countries and different regions around the planet Earth." So, yeah, I do believe that it needs to be advertised more. I think people need to know what it is because, yeah, especially my background being a technology person, a programmer, I was perceived as a database administrator. Almost every place I went, when people would read about the DBA, they got me into conversations about database, and I knew about it. I could answer those questions, but then I would have to stop and help them understand what a DBA is. Then the other part, the entrepreneur people in the room would hear doing business as. So I believe that that's part of our role as DBA scholars is to sell the DBA. That's why I'm proud to be a part of this podcast. I think we need for people to understand the value proposition there. The companies that are realizing it are going crazy looking for DBAs. I think I read just the other day that Maryland had just started a DBA program, and are excited now to encourage people to know what's going on. So they're throwing all sorts of symposia, bringing people to campus just to tell them what it is. Because Neil, you're absolutely right. A lot of people have no idea what it is, no idea.
Mhm. Mhm. And I also believe that it's very important that we make sure that these college programs are actually turning out quality graduates, not just turning them out, but they're not a critical thinker. They're not, they don't really know how to uh, find the problem, root cause analysis. Uh, so we really have to make sure that when they come in the program, they are transformed. I know the reason
Yeah,
why I say that is because it happened to me. When I
yeah,
went through my program, my chair confronted me and told me that I had a choice. Either I wanted to graduate or I didn't. And I thank God because I chose that I wanted to graduate.
graduate.
So when he told me what to do, he got my attention.
Yeah.
The question is, do we really have their attention, or what do we need to do differently to make sure that the credibility of the DBA program that we are turning out the product that we want to turn out?
That's a very challenging question. Plagues me all the time. To be honest, it's so interesting that you should ask that. Um, Part of what I did when I was at the Drive was to sell our connectivity of an undergrad accounting followed by an MBA followed by a CPA, and it was a similar thing. How do we sell that pipeline? How do we sell that connectiveness? Because that's quite a financial investment. That's quite a time investment. How then do we sell it? And so that's why I brought together a mentoring model and an intern and shadowing cooperative engineering and cooperative business type model where I had students as much as I could actually working with clients. So I think that kind of conversion, that kind of framework would help the DBA a lot if various people were getting in touch with some of these universities to say, I understand that you guys have a doctorate of business program going there. Could we meet with some of your doctorates and perhaps influence them into a capstone or a portfolio? because that was the big new knowledge for me, was the whole word capstone and portfolio, because everybody was doing dissertations, and I took the dissertation route too. But then later, when I realized that the practical packaging of a portfolio specific to a particular industry or a particular business is really extremely marketable for you who just received your name change, and it's helpful for the organization, because now they got this critical new age thinker talking to the CEO and the executives and the board, if they have access to the board, and it helps them brainstorm in a whole different way, because now they got this scholarly student coming in and then running it through the committee and all the other scholars that sit back at the academy. So I think that would work, to actually see the effect of a doctorate. I teach doctorate students about getting into consulting, and one of the things I talk to them early on in the class is, how do you define success? When you sit down with a client, do you define it? Do they define it? Or do you collectively define it? But it's got to be some kind of a definition framework for success, so you arrived. You read my bio about all the project management stuff I did. To give you an example of that, I was part of the team that created the ground station to test satellites in Southern California and Denver, Colorado, and the launch site in Florida, as well as Melbourne, Australia. So you can imagine, you're all over the place at all these different sites trying to get them ready to launch a rocket. So it took us about 6 months to do that. I had a team that went from 12 to 250 and back to 12 for every launch. From 12, I had a core group of 12, went up to 250 and back down. So the rise was physicists and mathematicians and programmers mostly, and then they went back to their project. So I got an early look at matrix management. Okay, but at one point we got a call from the Pentagon telling us that one of the satellites had run into some space junk, and we now needed to get something up in the air in 30 days.
Mhm.
And it was like, wait a minute, are you out of your mind? I mean, 6 months to 30 days. I mean, we have needed every moment of that 6 months. The government didn't want to hear if, they wanted to know how. They said, look, you guys have done this enough that you need to go back in your rooms and your labs and wherever you think through this, and come up
Mhm.
with a plan that tells us when we can get something in the air in 30 days. That
Mhm.
was the most exciting practical experience that
Come on.
trumped any project management class I took, anything about crashing a project, risk management, all the different things that I had been studying were all put to test right away. And we made our goal. We launched it, and made such a hit with the government. They wanted us to do a test launch with the space shuttle program. Unfortunately, I was part of the Challenger team, so when that happened, I sadly left that project. But the learning curve of actually combining theory and a practical application is
Mhm.
unbelievable.
Mhm.
Unbelievable.
Mhm. One of the things, one of the reasons why I was excited when you decided to come on the podcast is because I want to publicly let the viewers know that you have a wealth of knowledge and experience of putting together theory and practice. And so, with your experience, I mean, we've been in conversation. You've told me about your diverse background in different disciplines, in accreditation, and teaching, engineering. How do we teach the DBA the importance of being a scholar practitioner?
Oh boy, yeah, that's uh, that's a tough hurdle. Uh, Especially when you consider the politics per campus. I worked a lot with various deans with all the university positions I had, jobs I had. Some were wonderful, some were stressful, because universities are they have a different goal. They're trying to get the enrollment up. They are managing financial aid challenges. Nowadays, the freedom of speech is being looked at all over the world with what's happening in the Middle East. So universities have a goal that's a little disjointed from the DBA, I think. And so I believe what has to happen is the deans of DBA programs, especially, and maybe various other influencers that have a relationship with you and this organization, begin to have some symposia and have different on-campus conversations, so that even they understand. Because that was one thing I did when I started. I told you I helped to put together this track, that it helps people at DeVry and Keller get into being a CPA. Well, that didn't come overnight. I met with like 30 or so human resource managers from companies all over the Chicago area, and I would ask them, what could we do in our program that would make for such our students are so attractive that instead of you interviewing all over these other colleges in Chicago, you would only interview at our university. What would it take to do that? And they were very specific, critical thinking. And they went through a list, and then I just did what they said. So it doesn't take rocket science. And since I was a rocket scientist, I think I could say that. It doesn't take rocket science. You just need to understand what the people want. What are the corporate needs, and then bring that back to the academy, and then make whatever adjustments. The challenge is enrollment. If you especially if you're a proprietary school, it's enrollment driven, and so you have to do whatever you can to encourage a student that's registering for your school to say, it's worth it for me to go through this program and get a DBA, because at the back end, I'm going to be doing this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Um, and so that's going to take some work. That's going to take success. Perhaps some case studies, some endorsements from different DBAs like me endorsing this right now. Other folks that can shout from the mountaintops. I mean, I told you that my whole beginnings of becoming a DBA were because I met Dr. Greiner from Harvard. If I had not met him, and I consulted with him, by the way, he had me shadow him for a while. I didn't say that part of the story. I hung out with him a little bit. And then one day in the middle of a consulting engagement, he said, well, you know what? I'm going to go golfing. And one of my students, Brandon Hamilton, is going to take you guys through a case project, and then you're going to walk out of this with a mission and vision statement that he's going to help you create. I'll be golfing. I might do 9 holes, and I'll be back, and we'll see where it is. I was shocked. It was trial by fire. I was shocked, but that was good because I needed to step up. You need to be confident. As I said, you don't want to be the person that's reacting to the change. You want to be the change agent. You want to be the kind of person that's visionary. You want to be a leader more than a manager. Managers might know how to do it, but leaders know what to do,
Mhm.
right? So you need to be the kind of person that knows what to do. You need to be the kind of person that understands the macroeconomics of the planet, such that when you talk to these corporations and sit down with the board and the executives in the C-suite, you're bringing industry knowledge to them. You're bringing trended information to them. You're helping them to understand where they should be. This is where you are now. If you want to be more profitable, if you want to be more cost effective, whatever your business goals are, I'm the kind of person that can help you do that. And so that was the big difference between my MBA and my DBA. The MBA was really good because I majored in operations and enterprise planning when I did my MBA, but the DBA helped me to become a visionary, helped me to stay more in touch with what's going on around the planet. Read different worldly reports and the like, such that now when a CEO goes golfing with me or we hang out somehow, they're saying, "Wow, I think I just saw Dr. Hamilton come in the room. Can you uh, go with me? I'm going to go over there and sit down with him. Maybe we're going to have some coffee. I think there's something I want to run by him. That's what you want to be. You want to be that kind of person that is perceived as a thought leader, so that people want you in the room.
Mhm. Well, what happens when you come into an organization and you realize that what you see going on, what's really the standard operating procedure, that is not really working. And so now you don't want to offend anyone because they already know you have a doctorate in business, that
Yeah,
you're in the 2%. So the chances are when
yeah,
we go on the job that out of 100 people, there's only two of us with a doctorate degree. And it doesn't
yeah,
really have to be a DBA. There's only two of us in this whole
yeah,
building, in this whole organization,
yeah.
out of
With the
100
doctor,
with a
yeah,
doctorate
with a
degree.
title,
So the
yeah,
bullseye is on our backs. And the
yeah,
level of pushback that we get, because some people feel threatened. They
yeah.
feel
Oh yeah,
threatened
oh yeah.
because they know that some only have a bachelor's degree. So the reason why I say this is because for our viewers, those that are experiencing this type hostile environment, what's your experience? Tell us if you've ever had to deal with it and how did you deal with it?
uh, oh boy, yeah, you would start me off on that page. That's a tough one there. Absolutely yes. I think you know that. That's just the world we live in. But all leaders could tell you the same thing, that when you venture out, especially entrepreneurs, you're stepping away from the crowd a lot, so there's a lot of uncomfort with that. I ended up taking about 45, 50 hours of psychology postdoctorate. I said, I need to understand a little bit more about how humans behave and how they think and how they process what's going on with them, and then sociologically what's going on with the people that they are attempted to influence. So I spent a lot of time, learning and studying and working with psychologists. A lot of my good friends right now are psychologists. Matter of fact, I got my doctorate from Argosy. It came from the Institute of Professional Psychology that evolved into Argosy. So it was really a psych-based choice. Um, but it comes down to trust. To
Mhm,
answer it for you rather quickly, it comes down to trust. Another word I would add to this is caring. Caring.
mhm, mhm,
People are inclined to resist anything that you say if they don't understand that you care about them, and
mhm,
it's not you just want a new, because I live as a consultant, so I don't need to have the people feel like, well, here comes another high paying, high flying consultant charging us these ridiculous fees, oh my god, here comes another one, etc. He's just trying to finance his brand new car, and he's dressed like, sometimes now you notice I'm more casual. I used to come in all dressed to the nines and like that. I had to tone all that down a bit. So there is that. But then it's the T word, the trust. That takes a while. That takes a while. You have to develop trust. That's why I brought up the shadowing and the mentoring part of this. I really do believe DBAs need to not only work with their committee and get their capstone and portfolio together, but you also need to work on some projects, and publish some papers and all that, but work on projects. So um, it takes finesse,
mhm,
Dr. Rivers. It takes finesse. I didn't get it right away. Dr. Greiner worked with me a lot. We consulted with a number of organizations after that, and uh, he eventually let me almost take a complete leading role because he knew he was going to be stepping down. And he said, you know what, I think you probably need to take a few of these because I'm going to be stepping down, and I want you to maybe pick up some of my clients. So we work with some clients. Uh, Ben and Jerry's ended up becoming one of my clients. I work with BMW motorcycles. These aren't small clients. These were very complex things. I did a lot of information modeling for the City of Hope in California that was doing fundraising for cancer research. And if you know, they're an organization that tells their patient clients that there's no fee, so they need to raise money to do this. So I helped remodel that whole thing. Uh, I came back to Chicago, and there was a lot of conversation going on when I arrived here about something they called a local school council, where they wanted to decentralize the way principals are selected for the different schools. And so they had all these training programs that the mayor had put together, and people would go to the training programs, but then they wouldn't change the way they did business. So it's right in line with your question. People, no matter how painful, have a tendency to not want to change. You're complaining all the time, and you're in obvious pain, and you don't want to change. Okay, so one challenge that I have always going into an engagement is to help them share the pain points. Right? You were discussing root cause. I want to hear you tell me what are the pain points. And my skill as a scholar is to help phrase that instead of just symptoms, what's really going on. Let's try to get to the crust of the problem. But then the next part of it has to do with motivating to change. A lot of people, I grew up, I didn't talk about one part of my life where I had a very autocratic parenting going on, and I was punished a lot to do this, that, and the other. And my family had a series of Doberman Pinschers where we were training them to be show dogs. And so I grew up with this image of punish, 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 punish to make a person do something. So my first management role, if people weren't performing the way I wanted, I would go down to HR and try to get them fired. And after a while, the vice president of human resources said, I can't keep firing these people. You're going to have to work with some of these people. It costs money to hire. You need to learn how to work with what you have. And that was like a wake up call for me. You need to work with what you have. So I started then to switch from a punishment motivated model to a reward system motivation model. And I told you I
Mhm.
worked in a matrix project. Some of these people would come from the physics department, from Jet Propulsion Lab, from TRW, NASA, and they would work with me. I would
Mhm.
interview them when they got on my project to say, when you leave my project after we launch this rocket, what is your career going to look like? What new things are you going to add to your resume by working with my project? And I would then find a budget item such that they would be able to do something that back in their department, their director never ever gave them the opportunity to do, and they were just like in love with me. It's like, wow, I've always, like, for instance, I had one guy in accounting, and he wanted to know what marketing does. And he said, I'm always looking at their spreadsheets, but I really don't understand marketing. And I said, well, I tell you what, when you get on my project, I have to brief the people from the Department of Defense and all the people from the Air Force about what experiments we're going to be doing on the space shuttle. Why don't you come in there and see the public relations side of what I do? And then, when you go back to your department, then you can have some hands-on experience with doing that. So I
Mhm.
truly believe that's what it takes. It has to have one foot in knowledge and learning, but another deep foot into a project of sorts and a relationship of sorts. Because when you start out there on your own as a consultant, like I live, if you have not established a trust in your client, you're just the new person with the new trick, and the trick runs out,
Mhm.
and then you run out. But
Mhm.
people that have kept me along, it's not because I know everything. I don't. And who does? It's that they trust that I'm going to help them through their challenge.
Mhm.
I'm going to help them get to nirvana.
Right. Well, what I'm hearing, help me out if I'm wrong about this, but I'm hearing the importance of emotional intelligence
Oh
and
yeah.
relational intelligence and social intelligence and behavior modification and organizational behavior. So when we tie these things together, I submit, and I'd like you to talk about it. Do you see it as as it should be a core part of the DBA program? Because as it stands now, we have a lot in common. I mean, let me just tell the people a segue that I graduated from DeVry University, and you was very instrumental in their programs. And then I graduated from the Keller Graduate School of Management, and you were very interested and very involved in the development and the marketing and the creation of these programs. But the reason why I say that is because one of the most powerful courses that I had that I use even till today was the course in my MBA program, organizational behavior, organizational
Oh yeah.
management. So, that being said,
Yeah.
shouldn't we make
Wow.
sure that some of the terminal core objectives in the DBA program should be incorporating these skills and making sure that they have demonstrated ability? Talk
Yeah.
to me, Dr. Hamilton.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. When you look at management in antiquity, you have to go all the way back to the Sumerians. You have to go back to China. You have to go out to Greece. You got to go to the Romans, the Venetians. They each had their effect from 3000 BC up to 500 AD. The Venetians got us into org planning and working the sea, and the Greeks were very instrumental, in Egyptians in management practices and everything in between. But then when you started bringing in the early management pioneers from the 1700s to 1800s and so, Charles Babbage and folks like that, that was short lived because shortly after that, it got scientific. You had your Frederick Taylors and your Gilbreths and Henri Gantt, right? The Gantt charts that people do in project management, etc. And no one adjusted anything that these management advisors were doing. I think Frederick Taylor was actually the first person that created a consulting company. But then to move to what you just brought up, along comes Henri Fayol and Max Weber and Charles Barnard, and these classical management theories then uh, moved into almost CPA land, where everybody was looking at numbers, and if you weren't a CPA instead of a DBA, they didn't even see you as a consultant. Well, what happened is we went into some financial stresses. I got really, really interested in what happened in 2008 when the financial industry took a nosedive. But even before then, because that's what Dr. Griner and I used to talk a lot about. He worked overseas with the ICN group and a couple of other people in Asia, and he began to talk to me a lot about Elton Mayo. Now, interesting enough, I'm a Chicagoan, so when he mentioned that, I said, "Wait a minute, you're talking about the Hawthorne studies, where they were studying and thought they were looking at one thing, and just the fact that the lights were on and people thought they were being observed made them work more efficiently." I said, I'm very fascinated in that. And he said, well, that's even short-lived, because then Maslow came around, and Douglas McGregor came around with his theory X, theory Y stuff.
Mhm.
And
And
more and
and
more now, a
Ochi.
lot of people have to be behavioral. They have
Mhm,
to look at behavior. They have to look at the culture of the organization they're consulting with. They have to be internationally cultural aware when you start looking now across
mhm,
the pond. So, yeah, absolutely right. I mean, there was a big shift in consulting that went to the behavior model, and it has not left. But it comes back to also what you pointed out right at the beginning of this. You have to know yourself, because here you are navigating uncertainty with these folks. And if you don't have a strong sense of self and your conviction about what you think has to happen, you're going to be, found out. You don't want to fall into the imposter syndrome. You want to really be sure of what you do. So I write papers, I do YouTube videos, I share my knowledge all the time, because I want people to have a sense of just who I am. So when you bring me on board, I'm an information architect. I'm the guy that can kind of look at all of your enterprise and how everything comes together to help the CEO make better decisions. That's what I push. I don't want to leave that lane, because when you bring me on board, I am a heavy hitter. I am a hired gun, but I'm going to get right to the point, and we're going to solve your problem, and then I'm going to move on, so that you can, go on to success.
Mhm. Well, Dr. Hamilton, within the last 6 minutes of this call, I'd like you to tell our viewers about Hamilton Solutions and what exactly do you do?
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, Hamilton Solutions. The simple term is, I tried to learn by hanging out with the executives of a company, what things I can do to inform with information all the way up from the bottom up through the decision making ladder to the executive suite, such that information evolving from data turns into knowledge and then wisdom. All right. So data, information, knowledge, wisdom. Because the executives nowadays have decision making coming at them at the speed of thought. And too many of them are making decisions by shooting from the hip. So what my company does is I come in and I try to understand the whole enterprise and where you want to go. And I help align all of the business systems, all the information systems, from databases to website to cybersecurity protections, all of that, such that you are now moving through this very eclectic world with a certain amount of confidence that the next decision is going to be a well informed decision.
Mhm.
So I need to be around. I need to hang with you. It's not an overnight thing. I need to sit with the teams. Like when I started consulting with the City of Hope, for instance, they had 35 databases. Before I left, they were down to three. As I helped them to
Right.
understand the philosophy behind fundraising, it's really down to three databases. When I was consulting with a university in Southern California, they were getting ready for an audit, and maybe a month or two before the audit, the mainframe crashed. So we knew that the outside auditors were going to figure that we were trying to pull the wool over our eyes about something. So I had to grab together the information systems with a bypass system with another company to convince them that this was valid data, so that we weren't trying to trick them to get the audit. So that's kind of what Hamilton Solutions does.
Mhm.
That's what I do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know what? A lot of times when we sit in the classroom, I remember when I was taking a database uh, administrator course, and they talked about first, second, and third normal when it comes to the database. And
Yeah,
so we find that when we get in the field, that a lot of the problems that we experience has already been cited in the literature, and we do know what the solution is.
yeah,
And we have to be smart about it. We have to be tactful about it.
yeah,
We don't want to offend anybody, but we have to get them to make the necessary changes. So they taught me, they said, we plan, we organize, we lead them through the change, and then we try to control the process to make sure that they're doing
yeah,
the things
yeah,
that we told them to do. So that
Plan, do,
means
act, and replan. Mhm.
right. So
It's
that
never
so
over.
that
You plan, act, and redo, and replan, and act, and do, and plan, and act, and do. It's just a cyclic process, never
right,
goes away. And I think since you brought up database, that it would be wonderful if everybody could be in five normal, but the cost of being in five normal is prohibitive. So a lot of times it's not that they don't know it's better; it's just that it costs a lot to be better. So it's once again it needs a business mind to take a look at that to help them get the proper return on investment.
right. And I guess that's my shameless plug for the National DBA Society. The National DBA Society is designed with you in mind. Go to our website, www.dbasociety.org. Thank you, Dr. Hamilton, for being a part of this broadcast. We will bring you back and maybe we can talk about accreditation.
Okay, that would be wonderful. I love it. Thank you for inviting me. Enjoy the rest
Thank
of the
you
day.
very much. Yes, everyone, we thank you and have a good weekend.